Welcome to Thursday Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jessie Ott, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. This week, I'm speaking with Todd Bellomy, founder and brewer at Farthest Star Sake, based in Medfield, Massachusetts, located in the Boston area. Todd has spent a great deal of time in Japan, where his love for sake began. He was a sword-making apprentice and turned intern at Asahi Shuzo Sake Brewery Company before working for Boston Beer Company in the U.S. for 8 years. He then jumped over to sake again in 2014 and has never looked back. He now owns a warehouse where he brews 2 types of sake and serves them at his taproom. In a Strange Land is their flagship Junmai sake and is made with Yamada Nishki rice grown by Isbell Farms in Arkansas. It has fruit flavors and a peppery medium dry finish. Mountains on the Moon, their flagship nigori or unfiltered sake is made from the same rice and is fruity and sweet with clean acidity. I love learning about sake and the new world of sake brewers outside of Japan. And Todd, is so well connected, he knows all of them. I'll be leaning in on sake next year, and I look forward to building my relationship with Todd and beyond. Kanpai! Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Welcome, everybody, to Thursday Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jessie Ott, and I have Todd Bellomy here from Farthest Star Sake. Hello, Todd. How are you doing today?
Good, Jessie. How are you?
I'm doing great. You are my first sake brewer, so I'm super pumped. And what's even cooler is we get to taste a couple. So that's really exciting. I haven't had any sake from brewed in the U.S., so I'm very excited.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. So first time. Lots of firsts this time, I guess.
Awesome. No, that's really great.
So where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Medfield, Massachusetts. We're the only sake brewery in New England. And more specifically, because my assistant brewer is cleaning the brewery, we are in the koji room. So
Awesome.
We just emptied out the koji room. We just emptied it out because we finished brewing a batch today. And so it's a nice quiet place in the brewery for me to have a cool chat with you.
Yeah, and a real key ingredient into the flavor profile, right? It varies by brewer.
Yeah, it's the most expensive. The most expensive. It's the most important thing in sake brewing.
Yeah,
by far.
I can't wait to get into that. So, where are you originally from?
I grew up in Maine. Really rural Maine on a dirt road, and came to Massachusetts to go to college. And so that's kind of how I ended up in Massachusetts.
Okay, nice. And where is that near?
Where I'm from in Maine?
No, sorry, in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, Medfield is about 45 minutes southwest of Boston.
Okay.
It's in the sort of Boston suburbs.
Okay.
We needed a fairly large space for a brewery, so we have 6,000 square feet, nice. A full tap room. It was kind of prohibitively expensive anywhere near Boston.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. I mean, Boston is crazy. I haven't been in a while, but it's one of my favorite U.S. cities. I really love it there. It's so beautiful.
I love it so much. And we have a lot of great accounts and stuff in Boston, but the real estate is just astronomical to put a brewery of this size.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. So tell us a little bit about, post-college, did you get into the industry right away?
Actually, no. I majored in Japanese and linguistics at UMass, and I really wanted to spend some time in Japan. So I dropped out of UMass and went to Japan for 4 years. Don't worry, I came back and finished my college degree. But but I dropped out and just moved to Japan and lived there for a long time, and had a lot of great friends there who are still there. And then eventually came back here and finished my degree. It was during that time that I started home brewing again. So I had played around with home brewing a little bit. But when I got back from Japan, I started home brewing more and more on the beer side. And then once I finished my degree, I really wanted to work in the beer industry. So that's when I got into the brewing industry.
Interesting. So, did you leave college to go to Japan because you wanted to be immersed in the culture and you could learn a like you felt you could learn a language a little bit quicker, a little bit better, like being around
Yeah, way
Japanese,
quicker.
people all the
Yeah,
time. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I took French in high school 4 years and then a
Hmm.
semester in college, and I still it still wasn't very good. And then you go, and when I went to France, I got to spend a year there, so it got much better. But I still spoke a lot of English because of the school I went to was the level was all in English, so didn't speak it all
Yeah.
the time. But you really get immersed quickly.
Yeah, if I had to do it all over again, I would have majored in a something, business or marketing or whatever, anything, history, something easier than Japanese language. And then I would have maybe minored in Japanese, and then just got to Japan as quick as I could. Because once I was there, no one around me spoke English.
Uh-oh.
So in the first year, I probably learned more Japanese than I did the entire
Yeah,
time
you
I
didn't have
spent in
Google
college.
Translate. I don't know how we would have
Yeah,
we wouldn't have gotten very far without it.
it was the early days of the internet, so there was really nothing like
Brain
that. I
power.
did have the Yeah, well, the best thing about studying Japanese in college was that it gives you the tools to do your own research. So I had, a small group of reference books like dictionaries and things like that, and I knew how to look up things in Japanese. So I could look up things that I didn't understand pretty readily. And then this is early days, so really no cell phone yet,
Yeah.
but I had a little electronic dictionary, and you could look up whatever you wanted to on the fly.
Oh, well, that's kind of the same thing. That's cool.
Yeah,
Except for you have to
yeah.
type it.
That's all it did. So yeah, it was like 3 times the size of an iPhone, but that's all it did was like look up stuff. Yeah, it was just a dictionary.
Yeah. Oh man, we went to the local bar like where we
Mm.
were staying in Osaka by our Airbnb, and just to talk to the bartender, we were Google translating back and forth. It was really fun. It was really fun though. So,
Yeah.
you're in Japan. Where did you go first?
So I spent my first year as a sword making apprentice. So
What?
I
How
managed to hook
fun!
myself up. Yeah, I managed to hook myself up with a sword making apprenticeship for a year
Where?
to kind of test it out and see what it is. It's Saitama, which is the prefecture just above Tokyo.
Okay.
So I was however, I was in like as far north in Saitama as you could get. And so I was not anywhere near Tokyo, but I was just in the prefecture right above Tokyo, in the mountains, like in the far north of Saitama, for about a year in a very small village, maybe 150 people. Um, and after I left there, I had moved to Shizuoka, which is below Tokyo, like down near Mount Fuji. And I lived there for a while, and that was beautiful. And it was a slightly bigger town. It was like 30,000 people, and we were closer to some other larger population centers, so I could go and get more exposure to stuff. And then I moved to Tokyo
Ah.
my last year or so because my best friend lives in Tokyo still, and I wanted to live near him
Ah.
for like the last year I was in Japan.
So you were in the North Prefecture of Tokyo. So we took a 2-hour train ride and went to Sudo
Hmm.
Honke. Did you
Yeah.
ever go visit them or check them out?
No, I have some breweries that I'm kind of friendly with, and so I go to those places.
Okay.
I get a lot more out of it because I've been there multiple times.
Yeah.
If you go to I mean, I'm not opposed to visiting sake breweries when I'm in Japan, but there's a couple of like if I want to get work done and work in a brewery, there's a couple of breweries that will take me in. But yeah, I've never been to Sudohoke. There's like 1,450
Well,
breweries in
the
Japan,
reason I asked
so.
this specific one is because it's technically they say it's the first brewery in Japan, and it's from a samurai warrior family, and it's
Mm.
the 55th generation that's still running it. So I just um, we all got to pick a thing when we went to Japan, and that was
Yeah,
mine, and it was so much fun.
cool.
riding the train and experiencing, the American loudness in a Japanese train. But
Oh yeah. Japanese people are very quiet on the
so
train.
quiet.
Yeah.
You can hear a pin drop, and that not in our cart,
Yeah.
not in our car.
No.
But anyway, that was a real kind of amazing experience, and yeah. Anyway, just thought I'd ask.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I've been to a number of breweries all over Japan,
Yeah.
but there's so many of them compared to here
Yeah.
that, I could just go to breweries all day long and still not go to the same ones as some other
No,
people.
for sure.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
call with Jetro yesterday. They have a campaign, hashtag support sake. And she told me that the breweries I don't remember if it's the breweries and consumption or both, but they're down 50%. And that the Japanese government will not allow any new breweries to get a license.
I don't know if they'll allow it, but there's definitely some opposition, and it's very difficult to get licensing. Because of that, you're starting to see some very non-Japanese sort of moves. Like there's been some really small sake breweries that want to open, and sometimes they'll leave Japan and just go open. There's one in Paris. I know Wakaze opened a brewery in Paris.
Cool.
It was probably much easier for them to do that.
Dealing with the French is easier, huh?
Yeah. There's also a brewery that opened in Washington State. It's like a brother and sister. Their brewery was destroyed in 2011 during the tsunami and earthquake.
Yeah.
And so they rebuilt it in Washington State. So
cool.
You're starting to see some moves like that.
Yeah, I saw in Asahi just opened their brewery there in New York with the CIA there north of the city.
Asahi. Yeah.
So
yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I was wondering if you
nice.
had. I bet it's.
Yeah, it's real big,
real
modern, perfect. Top of the line equipment across the board. Yeah, definitely not how we're doing it, but yeah, it's impressive to see.
Yeah. So do you know those guys? Who's?
I do. Yeah, I spent a little bit of time at their brewery in Yamaguchi, where the original brewery is.
Cool. That is
back
so
in
awesome.
2009. Yeah, that's where I learned how to make koji. Was at their brewery in 2009, and the brewery's gone through I think 2 expansions since I was there, and now they have a brewery in New York. So yeah.
Is that the first Japanese, decent sized Japanese sake company to open up here in the U.S.?
No, it's the first Japanese sake brewery on the East Coast.
Okay, East Coast.
Yeah, there are 3 large Japanese breweries in California. Gekkeikan, Ozeki, and Takara. I kind of jokingly refer to them like Bud Miller Coors.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. They're the volume drivers.
Yeah, they're the volume drivers. They're making a lot of giant bag-in-the-boxes that get served as warm, cheap sake in restaurants.
Yeah.
And so that's going on in California. And there used to be, I think, an old brewery in Hawaii that closed, decades ago. But yeah, generally those 3 are the first Japanese ones.
So speaking about East-West, I've been leaning in on sake and talking to different people and educators. And couple of the people that I talked to have been in California doing this, or Oregon on the West Coast for 20, 30 years. And they've kind of told me about this East Coast, West Coast thing where they have worked West Coast so hard, and diligently for the, decades upon decades that it's more common, right, to have sake and different types of sakes and on menus and whatnot. So what do you think what is it going to take for the East Coast to kind of get up to that level?
Yeah, I mean, we both have the 2 largest sake markets in the country, right? So LA, as I understand it, is the largest sake market in the country, but New York is number 2.
Okay.
So we already have the second largest we have the second largest market in the country. The biggest challenge for the East Coast is getting up and down the coast.
Yeah. Gets kind of fragmented.
Places like
Yeah.
yeah, it's very fragmented. You're looking at a bunch of different approaches and attitudes, and if you go up and down the West Coast, California is very long, and then you've got things like Portland, and it's all on the Pacific Rim, so it has a lot more Asian influence.
Yeah.
That kind of gets you started. It's not going to sustain a brewery in the long term. If all you do is sell your sake into a sushi restaurant, then basically at some point you get saturation and you're just hanging out waiting for a new sushi restaurant to open. So, I think in the long term, we've got to go all kinds of different restaurants. The West Coast is good for that. It's got the Asian connection. Um, it's kind of a tighter market. And then the East Coast is really complicated. So it's starting to happen slowly. I mean, we're in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, but certainly pretty soon we'll be in Maine and places like that probably haven't seen a sake brewery in a long time. So I think it'll just take a little longer to kind of get people on the East Coast acclimated to the fact that you can have sake and a burger or sake and pizza or
That's exactly
just
it.
sake.
That's exactly it. And,
Yeah.
I'm WSET level 3 in wine, but we don't know
Mm.
anything about sake. I mean, it's like, like we don't know anything about
Yeah.
beer per se or whatever, unless you do your own, your own research. But,
Right.
to be in the industry this long and not get myself, into the sake understanding of, a deeper understanding of the actual process and whatnot, is kind of a bummer looking back. But now I'm all in, and it's fascinating. I've learned so much and so quickly. But to your point, the translation of how do we not only pair different foods, non-Japanese foods with it, but then get them to even understand the various categories. I think it's going to be a big push on the education side.
Oh yeah, and every sake brewery like mine that you talk to, education is in the forefront of what we do. I mean, we have a tap room here where we have people come in and eat all kinds of different foods here and drink sake. So that's pretty easy for us. But no, I agree. There's a lot of, I think over time, you're going to see a lot of non-wine people get into sake, which I think will help on the education side because at the end of the day, sake is not wine. And so
No.
you have wine distributors selling it, but it's from at least what I've seen in New England. I can't speak for other markets yet,
Yeah.
but from what I've seen in New England, our customer is more like a craft beer customer than a wine customer.
Okay.
We don't get a lot of wine people in here at all. Some, not a ton, but some. I mean, wine is very different. It's slightly lower alcohol than sake. It's got 10 times the acid and very different acids, right? So you get a lot of, you know, um, harsher acids, kind of, I guess, to say. Sake is lactic and succinic acid. It's all these like gentle, like richer acids. And so it's a completely different beverage. So from at least what I've seen in my neck of the woods, craft beer consumers are more likely to come here and drink our sake than wine customers. And then you get those people who are just beverage curious, that
Yeah.
drink everything across the board, right? They drink wine, they drink beer, they drink cocktails, whatever. Those people also come here. But yeah, we don't see a ton of wine industry stuff. Also, we're over 150 accounts in 2 states. And we don't have a ton of like really specialty wine accounts. We have a few that do really well. Like Enos in Providence or something like that. And they're like a very wine focused store and they do really well with sake. But at least in my neck of the woods, the Boston area, a lot of the wine specialty shops have not really sort of sold as much sake over time as just kind of a regular, really well curated liquor store.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. We'll get into the retail a little bit later because I think it's completely different. Aspect like when you go to a Total Wine, it's just a sad little section, and it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense, and it's all over the place, and But I get it. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned beverage curious. So
Yeah.
I think I might steal that and use
Oh,
it
please. I
as a
actually use the term
tagline.
sake curious.
I
I
love
use
it.
sake curious all the time. Yeah, so there are people who just come in here who might be beer people, might be whoever, and they're just sake curious. And now that there's a brewery in New England, they have a place to come,
Yeah.
right? And so, we're also lucky that Boston has a sake bar, right, called the Koji Club. And so if they don't want to come all the way out here, they can certainly go to the Koji Club, and that's just all sake, right?
Nice.
So, and it's very education focused. So the more those kind of places pop up, like the more people will be able to find answers. But that's the funny thing. I've always been intensely curious as a person my whole life, whether it's about food or alcohol or Japanese language or history or whatever. But um, I find these people where they try our sake one time and they love it, and then they become like huge sake fans. And I just, it's great, and I'm glad. I want to be that person for them. But also, I'm like, yeah, you could have just gone and bought a bottle of sake at any point in time. It's almost like they need an excuse to kind of discover it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, or stumble upon it at some point. Because when we went to Total, looking for some sake
Yeah.
this summer, because we had gone to Japan and we just loved we loved the selection of sakes over there. And
Oh, yeah.
we're checking out, and the cashier's like, "Oh, I've never tried sake." So it's maybe things like that. Well, maybe she's beverage curious enough to go try
Right.
it. you know?
Yeah. We have accounts like that too, where one person, the bar manager loves it. And then all of a sudden they just tell people, oh, have you had this local sake? And sometimes you need one or two people in an account like that to drive it. So here in Massachusetts, we don't have a lot of Total Wines or corporate liquor stores. I mean, they exist, but in much fewer numbers than
Yeah.
where you are. So we're dealing with a lot of just local family owned liquor stores on the off-premise side. We will approach Total Wine at some point. I don't know how big we have to make Farthest Star Sake before our stuff is fridge only. So if you go to Total Wine, you'll notice there's no sake in the fridge.
Nope.
So
Another educational
I,
component.
yeah, I tell everybody, I was like, listen, if you buy it at the store and it's not in the fridge, just bring it home, put it in the fridge, like right away.
So is it unpasteurized then?
No, our sake is pasteurized once. We use flash pasteurization, so we pasteurize the liquid. It's not in the bottle, and then we sterile bottle the sake. So, um, the difference between that and like batch pasteurization is that once the sake is in the bottle and you close it, you then can pasteurize the whole bottle with the liquid inside. But we don't have that kind of space or funding to buy batch pasteurizer. So we flash pasteurize everything once, and so it gives it great stability in the fridge. So it changes a lot less than a true unpasteurized namasake would change. But it still needs to be in the fridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we've done the testing. So we've done side by sides, left it out versus fridge, same batch, that kind of thing.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's go. Can we circle back to you were brewing beer and then you switched to sake. So what was your next
I
move?
did. So I was homebrewing beer, and then I started missing really fresh sake. And I think I probably complained about it a few too many times. And my wife Amy was like, you're brewing beer here, and we're drinking your beer. Why don't you just make sake if you miss fresh sake so much?
I love that.
And so
Good
it's
advice.
pretty great. And so, yeah. And now we have a
And
6,000
support.
square foot family run brewery.
I love
Yeah.
it.
So yeah, I was brewing beer at home, and then I started brewing sake at home. And at the time, there wasn't really any online information about how to homebrew sake. Um, so because I could read Japanese, I got Japanese brewing books from Japan, from the Brewing Association.
Wow.
And Yeah,
That's
and
impressive.
so I got those and started going through it. Took me a while, but I already understood the science of brewing,
Hmm.
so I think that made it a little easier for me. Also, some stuff is just straight up math. It has nothing to do with Japanese. But yeah, I read through it and kind of understood a lot of stuff, and then started making sake at home. Uh, and then shortly thereafter, I got a job at the Boston Beer Company in Massachusetts
Okay.
and moved up here to work for them and worked there for 8 years.
Okay.
It was a non-brewing job, and I really wanted to brew, but a company that size, I had no, I didn't have a PhD in microbiology or anything like that, and so a company that size, I'm just not really qualified in their mind to brew anything. So I just started brewing at home more and more and more, working in the sort of non-brewing side during the day, and
Yeah.
then at night I would brew stuff at home. And then I started, all my friends were brewers after a while, and then eventually I made like a sake beer hybrid at a
Oh,
friend's brew pub.
wait, what?
Yeah, yeah. So I made a sake beer hybrid at a friend's brew pub, Cambridge Brewing Company here in Cambridge, Mass. I became really good friends with Will Myers, who's still the head brewer, and we came up with this cool idea to hybridize both brewing processes and make a sake beer hybrid. So we did that, and that was the first time that I made anything larger than like, a bucket of sake. So we made 500 liters of sake, and I was like, oh, I could just have a room full of these. And so that's when I started to hatch the plan of I want to brew, my day job doesn't want me to brew there, so why don't I just keep brewing sake and, all that. Um, and so I worked there for 8 years. So a lot of stuff happened during 8 years, but, I made a sake beer hybrid with Will at the Cambridge Brewing Company. That was a big move. Then I took a couple trips to Japan and worked in some breweries. So I would basically take all of my vacation time at one time, leave the Boston Beer Company, go to Japan to get brewing experience in sake specifically, and then come back from my vacation and go back to work exhausted.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, yeah. I went to Japan a couple times, worked at brews, for a while, and
that's
it really
cool.
opened my eyes, to how to do it on a professional level. Yeah.
Can we circle back to this hybrid again? Can you
Yeah,
what
sure.
is
So
that? Like
yeah.
how does that work and what's
Um,
the flavor profile?
Yeah, so we basically made a small batch of sake and then used that sake to inoculate a tank of beer wort that was pretty high sugar. So the interesting part is because you have koji in the sake that could break down sugar starches into sugars. What happened was if we had just fermented the beer wort as beer, it would have been incredibly sweet, right? The beer process would not have broken down all of the available sugar, but we inoculated it with a tank of sake. So what you ended up with after a pretty long fermentation period
Long
was
meaning
really 6 weeks.
okay.
So really complex, almost like a barley wine style
Hmm.
beer. So high alcohol for sure, but really a lot of complexity and drier than you would think because the koji was able to eat away at a lot of those big fat sugar molecules and turn them into simpler sugars for the yeast. So yeah, kind of a dry-ish 15% ABV. Um, Sake hybrid thing. So definitely had some sake character because we used a sake yeast. So no beer yeast at all in the whole beer. So you got a lot of sake character from the yeast, but also some pretty unique flavor profiles because you had broken down things like maltose, which is the main sugar in beer, right? So you had broken down maltose and fermented it, which is a thing you don't ever do in sake. So it was pretty interesting.
That is really cool. Wow. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're at Boston Beer. You've done a few different or managed different business units there, or I guess
Hmm.
I don't know,
Yeah, yeah. Kind of bopped
bopped
around. I
around.
had my main job. My main job was talking to consumers about like high level QA problems. So broken bottles, beer doesn't taste right, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
And so yeah, yeah. They need someone like me between the brewery and the general public.
Yeah, that
You
makes
know,
sense.
you don't want some brewer, who hasn't seen the light of day in 2 weeks to talk to somebody on the phone about a broken bottle in their 12 pack. So yeah, yeah.
What was the part or the transition of okay, I'm going to start my own sake brewery?
So interestingly enough, we had done a couple of events. We had done the sake hybrid a couple times. We did an event, and I met a guy named Dan who who kind of was starting to sake brewery in Massachusetts. He had no brewing experience or anything like that, but he had a tiny little space, and he really wanted to brew sake in that space. So he was like, "Hey, you should come work with me." And so I was actually the only employee at Massachusetts' first sake brewery, which does not exist anymore.
Oh,
But yeah, it's okay. So I brewed all the sake, bottled it, delivered it, sold it, whatever, anything that was required to run the business. So, he kind of started it, and then it was very small. Like the whole brewery was maybe half the size of our taproom here in Medfield. So yeah, I just, I brewed it. It was a great experience to come up with a brand and, make the actual liquid and sell it and all that. And so, it was quickly apparent that I could make really good sake. And so after a while, so we got we got a cool following from that, but unfortunately the brewery was so small, and without any additional employees, you could only get so big.
yeah.
And then after a while, the owner closed it, and I just I was like, all right, well, I can obviously do that, and that's what I want to do. So I took a couple of years off and worked as a consultant in the beer and sake industry, and then raised money and wrote a business plan. It was a little bit hamstringed by COVID.
Yeah.
So we were starting to get money in from investors before COVID hit. And then once COVID hit, we just kind of hit the pause button,
Okay.
and didn't, touch any money, and just worked on a business plan and tried to find a location and kind of just slowly did stuff. And then once COVID started to subside a little bit, we signed a lease here in Medfield and started aggregating all of our investor money and going for it.
Yay. Exciting
Yeah,
times.
pretty cool. It is
So
exciting,
let's talk about the name Farthest Star Sake.
right?
Where did that come from?
Uh, as I was writing my business plan and actively developing the brand, you go to a lot of different areas and you kind of try stuff on and you're like, I don't know. And so after a while, I tried all these different brands out, on, sort of flush it out on paper. And I was like, eh. And then nothing really resonated with me. And then I'm a huge sci-fi nerd.
Okay. Which is
And
your
I
favorite?
started to, I don't know if I could pick a favorite, but
Oh.
that's a little too harsh. But
Okay. It's like picking
but
your
no, I'm
favorite
just
favorite
yeah,
beer or
yeah,
favorite beverage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like yeah, I could never do that. But certainly I'm a huge sci-fi fan across the board, books, movies, TV, and so I don't know. I started just thinking like this is my own project, right? It's not someone else who owns it,
Yep.
who wants a certain kind of brand. It's my brand. So I just was like, well, I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. Let's just, and then as I started watching a lot of sci-fi and thinking about different things, I realized that there's quite a few parallels between good science fiction and sake. And so in America. So anyway, so yeah, sake in America is this like ancient beverage, but it feels like it's like the next new thing, right? And a lot of science fiction that I love is kind of like that, right? It's like old but futuristic.
Yeah.
And so I started to see some things like that. Also, sake is a very discoverable beverage in America, as we were talking about before. So
Right.
a lot of people who come here and discover our sake for the first time, they want to be the ones who take that and introduce it to their friends, all that. So it's a super discoverable beverage. And, there's a lot of that in science fiction where there's, some protagonist out in the middle of nowhere and they get like this call to
Yeah.
adventure, you know? Yeah, yeah. And I thought like the spirit of that could be pretty cool. So we named it after, we said Farthest Star Sake because it's like an aspirational, you're kind of dreaming about getting up there, the farthest point you can see. And once you're up there, you realize there's like a universe of stuff beyond that. So we thought it made a lot of sense, especially given where we are.
Well, should we do a tasting?
Yeah, sure.
Let's
Let's
do it.
crack this guy first.
Okay, this guy first.
Yeah. So this is In a Strange Land. It is our flagship filtered sake.
Okay.
They are twist off beer crowns.
I'm not
Oh,
strong
no.
enough. My hands
Just
are
use your
sweaty.
sleeve. I like to tell people they're twist offs because you have to be careful.
There we go.
If you use a bottle opener, sometimes it gets caught on the threads and you can like rip the top of the bottle. So,
Okay, that's not good.
yeah, twist off. Twist off is easy.
Yeah.
And then
Okay. Oh wow, look at that color.
clear.
Yeah.
So we use the best rice in the world for making sake.
Which one?
It's called Yamada Nishki.
Oh yeah.
Yamada Nishki.
Okay.
So both of our sake that we're tasting today are Yamada Nishki 70. So 30% has been milled away. And it's kind of the bottom of premium sake in Japan. So this one, I wanted it to be a very approachable, complex, all-purpose sake.
Smells
And
amazing.
so hard water, so you get some minerality for sure in the flavor, and then finish. And 2 yeast strains. So one of the yeast strains is kind of fruity, and the other one is a little spicy.
Okay.
So you get kind of fruity mid palate and up front, and then dry kind of peppery finish. Yeah,
Nice.
and makes it uber food friendly.
Yummy.
Yep. And so, thanks. Yeah, 16%
Oh,
alcohol
16%.
and kind of medium dry in Japan. It's +5, which is like a medium dry.
Medium dry.
Some of the people listening might not know about sake. So, Nihon Shudo is like sometimes called the sake meter value. SMV is a scale that in the middle is 0, and then it goes plus numbers on one side and negative numbers on the other. So plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gets drier,
Okay.
and -1, -2, -3 gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. Yeah.
So,
And so 0 is technically water.
and in Japan, which one sells more, sweet or dry? Do you know?
What's interesting is right now, or at least the last time I was in Japan, which is like admittedly a little bit ago, but last time I was in Japan, it seemed like instead of 0 being the middle of the road, I feel like kind of +2 is the middle of the road. I feel like they trend a little dry.
A little drier.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in the U.S. I don't know how many I don't know what the breweries are making, if it's drier or sweeter, or what styles they're focusing on.
It depends on the brewery, but I think certainly the American market could sell some sweeter sakes and get away from it. So I'm pretty sure that America drinks more unfiltered sake than Japan does.
Really? Interesting.
I think so. I heard that years ago. It's probably still true. So it's not always true, but unfiltered sakes tend to be sweeter than filtered sakes. you don't really want a dry, unfiltered sake because you have rice particles in the liquid. And so if it's dry, there's not a lot of glucose to sort of suspend those particles.
Mm-hmm.
So then it just tastes like a chalky sake, right? It doesn't have any roundness to it, which is why ours is, pretty sweet.
So, can you talk a little bit about the process of making sake and
Sure.
the ingredients that are pretty main ingredients for just in general for a sake brewing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, sake simply is made from rice and water and two microorganisms. So, koji, which is one of the microorganisms, is responsible for breaking the starches in rice down into sugar.
Okay.
And then yeast, which every alcohol producer on the planet uses,
Yep.
is responsible for eating some of those sugars and turning them into alcohol and carbon dioxide and a lot of chemicals that you and I perceive as flavors and aromas, right? And so that's basically how you make sake. So you use koji to break down the rice and use the yeast to eat the sugars and make flavors and aromas and alcohol. And both of those processes happen at the same time. So it's the balance of those two that makes really good sake. If you're out of balance, let's say your koji is really healthy and your yeast isn't so healthy, what happens is the koji makes a lot of sugar and the yeast can't keep up. And then you have a giant tank of food where any errant microorganism could land in
Finland,
there
yeah.
and create sort of off flavors. And then on the flip side, your yeast is really healthy, and your koji is not so healthy, then the koji can't keep up with the demand of the yeast, and you get what's called autolysis, which is where yeast cells die and cannibalize each other, and then that creates a lot of kind of savory off flavors in your sake. And so that happens as well. So you need to really keep the two processes in balance.
How?
And then,
No, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say the unique part of sake, or I guess one of the unique parts, is that when you're finished, you have to press out all the physical stuff because all that rice and all that stuff is still in there. And so when you're finished and have finished sake, you have to press everything out to clarify the sake.
So, how long does it take to make koji?
Our koji is like 48 to 52
Okay.
hours. So on the second day, we sleep here to monitor it, all the time. But yeah, it takes 48 to 52 hours. Our koji room, which I'm sitting in right now, can grow about 200 kilos of koji at a time. And so that's enough to do a full batch of sake and a smaller batch in our R&D setup at the same time. So we, tend to do that almost every time. And so sake as a whole takes like 6 to 8 weeks grain to glass. So you make koji, it takes, let's say, 3 days. And then you can start brewing, and brewing takes 4 days to complete a brew. And then it's a pretty long cold fermentation. So our fermentations here are a little longer than like commercial sake, but we're about 42 to 45 days of fermentation.
Okay.
A cheaper table sake or some larger breweries will shorten that. Some sake is like 28 days, but you don't get as much complexity. And so at least now, while we're not a humongous company, we're going to sort of luxuriate in that ability to just lower the tank temp and take a longer time to make more complicated sake.
So when you're spending the night, what are you looking at? What are you trying to make sure is happening?
The genetic material that produce all the enzymes that you need in the koji are actually in the root structure of the koji. They're not in the outside growth. And so as we're growing the koji and the heat is going up and up and up, we're trying to manage heat because it'll actually make enough heat to kill itself.
Okay.
But we're also trying to slough off moisture because as you're growing the koji, you want to dry the koji out so that the koji, fungus chases the moisture to the inside of every grain, and you get a lot of root structure, which increases your enzyme load, and makes a better fermentation.
So that kind of leads into the next question. You mentioned a type of
Yep.
rice, and I read that you use Isbell Farms, which is
We do.
like a huge. I was listening to Sake Revolution, and I heard the granddaughter talking, kind of explain the background of it, which is phenomenal and so interesting. I had no idea that Arkansas was I think it's the number one state for rice production, period. And then sake, of course.
I think they grow more.
Export.
Arkansas grows more rice than everyone in the U.S.
There you
combined.
go. That's it. Sorry.
I'm pretty sure
that's
yeah. They grow a lot of rice.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And one of the things that I've learned about the sake process is the milling and the grinding of the outer shell. Do you want to talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Sure. Yeah. So the reason that we use Yamada Nishki and some other sake brewing rices instead of using just eating rice is that the Japanese cultivars of sake brewing rice, there's over 140 strains in Japan, right, of sake brewing rice. Over the centuries, they have cultivated rice that has all of the starch or most of the starches concentrated in the middle of the rice. And so as you mill away the outside, you're milling away mostly proteins and fats, which don't really ferment.
Okay.
Right? So you're interested in pure starch. So as you mill away the outside, you're milling away more and more proteins and fats. And now your pile of rice is a much higher percentage of pure starch, which is going to result in a cleaner, kind of more ethereal sake. The Japanese consider this a higher grade of sake. So all of the grading in sake happens with mill rate. I think for me, since we're not in Japan and I have to follow their rules, I kind of feel like for me, it's just like another expression of sake. I don't think it's better or worse. It certainly is higher priced because as you mill the rice down, you're taking a lot more mill time, and the rice costs me a lot more money. So, and is a little tougher to brew. It's a little more delicate to brew, and it requires more labor to brew. So those sake need to be more expensive. But, I've had great sake that's, 75% mill, which is, not even on the spectrum for most, like sake grading guides and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Well, should we try the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is called Mountains on the Moon.
Mountains on the Moon.
And is our unfiltered sake. So you should shake it.
Shake it.
Don't worry, it's not carbonated. You can really actually shake. Yeah. I get some people, they go, and I go, no, you gotta, yeah. So one of the problems with nigori sake is it settles very quickly.
Okay.
And so we actually have a little bit of a problem in the taproom. We're trying to come up with a new solution, maybe a special tank that pumps it around, because we're having a real problem keeping it suspended within an 8-hour taproom shift.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's check it out.
Yeah, Mountains on the Moon. So Mountains on the Moon is same rice, Yamada Nishki 70. By the way, all of our bottles have a tech spec thing on the side. Sorry, upside down. Has a tech spec thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it'll always have the mill rate. It'll always have what kind of rice, that kind of thing. And so Mountains on the Moon is our nigori. I never really was a big nigori guy for a long time. But when I was developing an unfiltered sake, I just thought to myself, what do I want to drink? So our unfiltered sake has a few differences between a traditional Japanese one. So it is definitely unfiltered, but it is not very heavy.
Okay.
So it's not goopy. Some Japanese nigori sakes are very heavy with rice particles. So ours is a little lighter. It is a style you can find in Japan. It's called usu nigori, which means thin nigori. So you'll notice it's not,
Yeah.
it's not like milk.
Yeah.
It's
It's not
hazy,
like all
I
the
guess would
bananas
be
in my protein shake this morning.
yeah. I've seen some Japanese sakes that are crazy, but
That's
yeah,
so
so it's
pretty.
hazy, I guess would be the best way. Thanks.
Yeah. Great
And
color.
so in opposition to the first one, you're looking at very soft water instead of hard water, so no minerality, and another yeast strain. So there's two yeast strains in the first one. There's a third separate yeast strain in this
Okay.
guy, and it is a very fruity yeast strain. So you're looking for just layers of fruit on top of fruit on
You're
top of
right.
fruit.
It's so clean. I mean, it's not clean. But it smells so smooth.
Yeah.
And
Um, it's like the perfect nigori yeast in my mind. So very fruity. And then the reason we use really soft water is that when I use soft water, I get an overall slightly higher acid than I do in the finished sake with using hard water. That makes sense. A lot of the water minerals you use are alkaline, so it might offset that. So I end up with a slightly higher acid. So my nigori sake is a little higher acid than a Japanese nigori, and that helps balance the increased sweetness.
okay.
So that was my whole goal, was to make it a little more balanced, a little more food
Okay.
friendly. Yeah.
Oh, that's yummy.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost got this kind of
So
like I don't want to say tart, but just slightly like uh it's hitting my senses back in the back of my mouth going like
yeah,
it's just so it's like it's got other layers going on inside of it that is yes,
yeah.
this is, a smooth sake, and then it's got this kind of cool like surprise. It's not a tartness. I don't know how to describe it, but it's awesome.
Yeah, it kind of comes in at the sides of the mouth, kind of
Yeah.
like cheddar cheese
I
does.
guess that's the
Yeah.
acid.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's the acid that comes in. Yeah, so slightly higher acid, and it just makes it much more food friendly and cleans it out, so it's not just heavy, ricey,
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah, that was my kind of goal when developing unfiltered sake for my market. The coolest thing about the sake market is it's all discoverable to everybody. So I'm still in that kind of almost like the early days of craft brewing in the 80s. I can just make whatever I want and just make what I want as an expression of me as an artist and just make whatever I want and tell people, hey, try this, try this, try this. Not, people aren't familiar enough with sake to demand a
Right.
style or that kind of, yeah. Like I feel beer brewers have kind of painted themselves into a corner. Everybody demands hazy,
Yeah.
fruity
IPA.
IPAs,
Bleh.
and that's it, right?
So
Well, and they have to brew that stuff.
so can we talk about, I don't know if you can see this this
Yeah,
little, is it a QR code, and then it's got
it's a QR
descriptions of
code. Yeah, it
different
does.
flavor profiles,
Yeah.
and then you highlight which one it is. So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, we tried to fit a ton of information onto this tiny little label. I would like also to say we didn't discuss it, but we only make single serve bottles.
Yeah, let's
We
talk
don't make
about
big
that
bottles.
too, the size, because this is very
Yeah.
unique.
So again, thanks. We talked about how sake is a discoverable
Right.
beverage, right? So one of the things that you want to do in a market that has everyone discovering sake for the first
Yeah.
time is lower the cost of entry, right? So single serve sake is not a new thing. There are Japanese cups and Japanese cans that have existed for a long time. So most of the cups in Japan are 180 milliliters, which is a unit of measurement
Mm-hmm.
in Japan. It's called one go, is 180 milliliters, and that's kind of a serving of sake. And so in 1972, Kikasui Brewing canned sake for the first time, and they made the cans 200 milliliters. Because if you understand that one go is a serving of sake, now you're like, oh, it's one go plus 20 milliliters. So we're giving you
More.
more than a serving. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's more than an official serving, right? So that's why they use the 200 mil thing. So we found in the United States, actually Virginia, Owens, Illinois, which is a huge glass manufacturer, makes this bottle in Virginia, and it's 207 mils. So it's just a tiny bit bigger than Japanese single serve, which I think is appropriate for the American market. And it's a cool bottle geometry, I think.
Yeah.
But
It's a
yeah,
unique
so we,
offering.
it's got a, yeah, so we do this and draft. So we do draft for restaurants
Okay.
and
I was
stuff.
gonna say to you.
But yeah, we tried to.
I was gonna ask about that.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we tried to cram as much
Mm-hmm.
information on this tiny little label as we could. It's not a very big label. Obviously, our logo has to go on here. There's some stuff like alcohol and volume
Mm-hmm.
that's required by law. And then sake is like you have to streamline everything
Mm-hmm.
because people just have to go, oh, and throw it in their basket. So every style that we make has 3 words, like 3 descriptors. And we'll just do that going forward. And then tech specs for those people who are nerdy. And then a little QR code that goes to our website with a page about this particular sake. And then there is a little metric
So
around there
cool.
for people with younger eyes. But it just says dry, balanced, sweet, and then clear and cloudy. Yeah.
So how are
And
these
so
like the
you just know.
4-pack or 6-pack or?
No, single. I mean, we sell them to distributor and accounts as 24. It's a case of
Okay.
24. So they come in a case of 24, but the store or the restaurant sells them as single serve.
Okay. And a retailer single
And we
serve.
price them.
Well, I guess you said it's
Yeah, they're retailer single serve. Yeah.
it's in the cooler.
We price them so hopefully in a store under 10 and on a restaurant menu under 20.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, we're using U.S. grown Yamada Nishki. We're not using eating rice or sushi rice or anything. So it's premium sake that's handmade, that only gets processed as much as it needs to be. And then, arrives very fresh to the retailer.
So
Yeah.
I realized that we've been talking almost an hour and we haven't even got through half the questions. Do you have time to kind of blow through these?
Of
Okay,
course.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any key people or mentors that have helped you throughout your career?
Yeah, I've got more than I could possibly count. I mean, there's a large number of people I worked with in the beer industry, from all aspects of brewing. My friend Will Myers, who's the head brewer at Cambridge Brewing. Grant Wood, who's the guy I worked with at Boston Beer. I mean, all these people. I've got a ton of those kind of mentors. And then in Japan, I've made some really great relationships with Kikusui Brewing in Niigata. They make that little Funaguchi gold can. Really impressive work that they do on the single serve sake side.
Yeah, you can
I
buy it in
love the
the
guys at
streets
Dasa.
in a vending machine.
Yep.
Yep, you can get a
Yeah.
highball, beer, RTD can of
whatever.
coffee, and sake.
Yeah, you can buy everything. Yeah. So they've done a lot of work since, 1972,
Yeah.
the year I was born, they put sake in a can for the first time. So, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And I've certainly also, always gleaned a lot of information from, John Gautner, who's, the granddaddy of, sake education in English. And so he's done a lot of work writing about sake, and there's a lot of people to learn from. I think, even people making sake in North America, I'm super friendly with, Blake at Motoi in Minneapolis, who's, I think the first guy to ever open a sake brew pub, ever. I think they like to say the first sake brew pub outside Japan, but sake brew pubs don't really exist in Japan. Like occasionally you'll find a brewery that has like some food in it kind of thing, but it's not the same thing, right? A brew pub is a brewery that only makes sake for the restaurant, right? They don't make sake anywhere else. And so I think he's the first guy to open a sake brew pub ever. And he's amazing. And, all these people, great brewers across the United States and Canada. And recently, I've been drinking some Nami sake from Mexico City, which is really amazing.
Yeah, I've learned
So
about that.
it's pretty
Yeah.
cool. We're the coolest thing about the sake industry for me is we're a pretty tight knit group,
Well, you're small.
and so there's only yeah. I haven't made a count recently, but I would say there's between 40 and 50 sake breweries outside Japan total,
Wow.
and
And we know
so
two of
it
them,
is
one's
cool to
in
be.
France and one's in Mexico.
We got that, yeah, certainly, yeah. There's three in Canada, and then one in Mexico City, and then 24 or so in the United States.
Gotcha.
Uh, I guess if you wanted to include those big Japanese guys in California, you could do that. And then you still know you're in the infancy of a industry where there's like one guy in Italy and one guy in London, and you know what I
Yep.
mean? It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know,
So there's a
I
sake
find that
movement worldwide, is what you're saying.
It is very slow and small, but it is definitely going. And profits or revenue is definitely going this way. It's definitely going up, and people are starting to discover sake for sure. It's I don't think it's gonna
Right.
explode, like seltzers or whatever.
Right.
It's not gonna do that kind of thing. But that's good because all of those beverages that exploded overnight and had this like big, crazy thing, they all kind of leveled off and then went back down,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
So I would rather be slow growth but
Yep.
steady growth.
100%. I'm with you.
Yeah.
So, what about any key learning tools? I mean, you've mentioned your dictionaries that you took over to Japan, and obviously some books that you use. But are there any podcasts or even just on a personal level, how to
Yeah.
be an entrepreneur or you know
Yeah.
how to stay healthy because you want to you end up working so so much. Like, is there any kind of guidance or help that you'd like to offer?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I tell every sake brewer in the United States is to join the Brewing Association. I know it's very beer focused, but you get the American Brewer Journal, which is an amazing resource. And then you actually get access to all of the talks from the Craft Brewers Conference going back
Wow.
decades.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's only, $250 a year or something like that. And you get access to thousands of talks and their PowerPoints of people from the Craft Brewing
That's
Conference.
cool.
That is a huge, probably one of the biggest resources I use on running a brewery, right? But specifically, if you wanted to know about sake, John Gottner is, sakeworld.com. He is the most prolific English language kind of writer and educator on sake in the world. And you'll learn if you're starting fresh, you've got a lot of stuff to go through over the last 30 years. And so there's that. Certainly, I love all of the podcasts. I love How I Built This with Guy Raz, which is an entrepreneur podcast where he just talks to it's NPR, but he talks to people who own companies and have started brands across a wide spectrum of
Interesting.
industries. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
actually gotten a lot out of specific episodes that had nothing to do with what I do,
Okay.
which is pretty interesting. And also Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor in chief of Entrepreneur Magazine,
Okay.
does a number of podcasts. I've kind of lost count. I think Jason needs to take a break, but I've lost
He's addicted to
I've lost count.
recording.
Totally. Yeah. He's like, let's just make another podcast. So, but yeah, he has a number of podcasts, Entrepreneur Magazine. So, some of it you got to take it with a grain of salt. Brewing, if anyone out there is looking to start a sake brewery, brewing is not a make money quick, get out of it, industry. So you're building a legacy industry, with a ton of stainless steel equipment. And so it is not like building an app,
No,
right?
no.
And so some of those things, some of those entrepreneur things, you can get kind of tricked into like, oh, she just came up with this cool idea, then it blew up, and then they ordered more from China, which is my answer to everybody who thinks I should go on Shark Tank. It's like tons of people
Why
are like,
not?
oh, you should go on Shark Tank. Because Shark Tank's not really looking for artisanal products,
They want
right? They're
volume.
looking for something.
Yeah.
They want
Yeah.
volume. So they're not looking
Expansion.
to build a
Yeah.
legacy, right? They want to go, oh,
Let's
we
get you
signed
in
a
Walmart.
contract with Home Depot.
Yeah.
Right. We signed a thing with Walmart. We can just pick up the phone and order 40,000 more units. Sake doesn't work
No.
that way. Neither does beer or
Yeah.
wine, which is why you don't really see those people on,
Yeah. That makes
right?
sense.
Yeah.
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 What about pain points that you've experienced in the industry?
Um, Yeah, I mean, there's been a few. One thing, especially, and time is the only cure for this, is that equipment manufacturers and a lot of sort of like stuff that normally is brewing resources,
Mm-hmm.
they have no idea about sake. So, for example, all my tanks are wrapped in glycol, which is like a food grade antifreeze. Um, so I have a glycol chiller outside and it circulates cold glycol and then the tanks come on and off to maintain a temperature, right? It's very common technology in the brewing industry. Every brewery has a glycol chiller. And so when you call them and you're looking for a glycol chiller, they really don't have any idea how to size a chiller for a sake, right? Because it
Yep.
doesn't work the same way
Mm-hmm.
that a beer brewery does. Same with like a filter press or things like that. Excuse me, they have no idea uh, how to size any of that equipment for sake. So some of it you kind of have to wing it, you which sometimes results in you like over engineering
Yep.
something or over buying something because no one has any idea.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's been a pretty big pain point. And then, obviously on the distribution side,
Okay.
we were lucky to sign on with like a pretty good distributor who has some sake experience.
Mm.
But, every
Key.
day it's, hey, yeah, every day, every day with salespeople in the market and stuff, you're like, hey, I know you want to go to this noodle place and sushi place and all that. Do that,
Do that.
great.
And
But also go to the cheese shop and the taco place and the whatever. We actually, as a side note, do really well in cheese shops. So we're in a number of really high end, great
nice.
Fromage and Kitchen in Boston and Eve and Murray's and Concord Cheese Shop. Like they just do really well with sake. Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things that was a big takeaway for me experiencing, so many sake experiences in Japan was, I mean, there are two things that, that I really learned. Well, probably three. Um,
Yeah.
is the versatility of sake with all the multiple types of foods you're eating in one setting. Wine can
Right.
it's open, but you just certain wines go better with certain foods. And sake is more
Mm.
even keel and open to so many types of flavors in one setting. You can have meat, you can have fish, you can have sushi, you can have, whatever. And that to me was like a light bulb. Oh, wow, that's really, really cool,
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
second,
Some of that is the acid,
yeah,
There's so much acid in wine. It's just like so high compared to sake or
yeah,
beer. And so those are my experiences, right? I come from the beer industry into sake. So I'm used to kind of a lower acid. That blisteringly high acid level in wine is challenging,
yeah.
you know?
No,
Yeah.
100%. And the other component that was kind of surprising, we met up, my wife's cousin lives there and he married a Japanese woman. And so we met up with their
Hmm.
friends while we were in Osaka and we were like, yeah, let's go do a sake tasting. So they took us to a place where it's literally a place for sake tasting and you sit at like picnic tables and they have a refrigerator over
Yeah.
here of all these 1.5 bottles. And they probably just put 10 of them on the table and everybody took a little sip and tried it and then just passed it around. And then that was the end of it. I'm like, that's the end
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to see all these different styles of sake in the refrigerator open. And I've since learned that it doesn't go bad. Like in the case of
No,
wine.
it's not like wine where you open it and you
Right.
got like a week. Yeah, I have, sake bottles between me and my wife don't really last that long in the house, but I've had sake open for 6 months before.
Wow.
Just half open bottle it got pushed in the back of the beer fridge or whatever. And you go to drink it and it's fine.
That's insane to me.
I mean, it's different because you've introduced oxygen, but it's not bad.
Yeah, that is.
It's just different.
So
yeah, sake with age gets kind of earthier and nuttier.
So from a restaurant perspective, that's a very interesting thing to have a pairing, because you can keep the bottles in the fridge and you don't have to sell. You can get the 1.5, save cost. And
it's actually, sorry to interrupt, it's 1.8.
Oh, 1.8 liters. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, remember how I talked about single serve sake
Yeah.
is 180 milliliters? That's one go. Everything in the sake world is built off that.
Okay.
So 180 milliliters is one serving.
Okay.
And then 1.8 is like the typical kind of bottle in a restaurant, right? And then they have these glass things that they use to move sake around breweries in Japan. That's 18 liters. And then they report taxation and production numbers in what's called one koku, which is 180 liters.
Okay.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
Everything's built off that single
serving. Well, that makes sense. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What is your outlook for sake in 2024?
I'm pretty excited about 2024. We are starting to expand to a number of different markets, and we're having some interesting conversations with some distributors in different markets. As New England's only sake brewery, obviously I want to be everywhere in New England.
Of course.
But I think there's like so much upside. There's some people who are ahead of me for sure. Asahi just opened their, I don't know how many tens of millions of dollars of brewery, but huge, gigantic modern brewery in upstate New York. Brooklyn Kura in Brooklyn signed a cool deal with Hakai-san, so they have a partnership and they're starting to look at increased distribution. So what I'm excited about is craft sake getting a broader piece of the pie across the country and across the world, because it's just so different.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with craft beer and mass produced beer. Our sake, I deliver it to accounts sometimes that it's gone 10 miles.
Yeah, I mean,
it's 2 weeks old and it's gone 10 miles.
Our consumers are trained to love craft, and they've been trained to love higher quality beverages, so it just makes total sense.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need more craft sake in the United States. And so there's a good number of breweries. We just got to educate people about where they are and how to get them and see some sort of increased distribution so that people can try it. Yeah.
So, Todd, what are your passions outside of, spending the night in the brewery and drinking
I don't know if that's a passion. Necessity for sure. But yeah.
What's your passions outside of work?
Outside of work, there's not a lot of, when you own the brewery and make the sake, there's not a lot of outdoor. No. I spend as much time as I can with my family. I have a wife and I got an awesome kid, and she is 13 going on 20. And
that's about right.
I try to spend as much time with my family as possible. I shoot archery quite often in my backyard. So I shoot a lot of archery. It helps kind of calm down the elevated levels of cortisol that I produce at work. And then I love to bake and cook. So I actually bake a lot of bread for my family.
That's hard. So you're good. Well, you brew. You're a
brewer. So bread is not hard. No, bread is not
baking
hard.
bread is so hard.
It's not hard.
Well, throw in the gluten-free element, then it's really hard.
Oh, yeah, gluten-free bread is hard. It's basically you're trying to make like a delicious sandcastle.
Sandcastle
is about right. Nothing. There's nothing to really, and so it's very difficult. My sister-in-law is celiac, and so I've tried my hands at gluten-free baking, and it's very
It's an
difficult.
art.
Anyone who does it, hats off. Yeah. But yeah, I do that. I watch sci-fi movies and TV shows, and kind of chill out. I don't really have a lot. I would like to have a lot of hobbies, but
Someday you'll get back into
I
it.
can I convinced my wife to build a giant
Yeah,
brewery. So
that's it.
that's
That's your
you're locked out of hobbies. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have one remaining question, and it's the most important
Hmm.
one. No, just kidding.
It's
Since you're a sci-fi fan, does that include Star Wars?
of course.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I love Star Wars. Listen. The Star Wars, George Lucas, the original stuff, is based a lot on the writings of, a lot of stuff that I've. It's based a lot on, a lot of writings that a lot of people follow to make stories, and so there's the whole hero's journey and the, call to adventure and stuff, and so, yeah, he really tapped into some of the basic components
Yeah.
behind a lot of really successful sci-fi.
Yeah, well put.
Yeah, I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I can't choose between the two.
Yeah.
That's usually the question everyone else knows: Star Wars or Star Trek? And I'm like, that's a tough one. I don't think I could choose between the two.
Yeah, we grew up watching Star Wars over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. However, on the flip side, there's way more Star Trek content.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, just now they're starting to make these amazing Star Wars shows, like The Mandalorian and
thanks to Disney.
Yeah, Ahsoka was just on. Yeah, it was really great. But, Star Trek has been making shows, for decades. And so there's a lot more Star Trek content, I feel. But yeah, Star Trek has also been less successful in the movies. Some of the original series movies were pretty clunky. If you talk to any sci-fi fan, it usually is evens and odds. So Star Trek 1 and 3 and 5 are pretty bad, and 2, 4, and 6 are amazing.
Okay.
So in the movies, but yeah,
I think there's a little bit of that in Star Wars.
There's a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, there's There's actually a really cool thing called the Machete Order. I don't know if you've ever heard of that,
Nope.
but it's a smarter way to watch Star Wars. And so if you look at the first 6 movies, the Machete Order was made before the later movies, right, with Rey and Finn and all that. So if you look at the 6 movies that George Lucas made, the smartest way to watch them is to watch 1 and 2, so Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, then watch 2 and 3, and then 6.
Okay.
I'm sorry. 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, if you want to think about it that way. So 4 is A New Hope, which is the original Star Wars that came out in 1977. You watch that. You watch Empire. Hopefully everyone who's watching this podcast has seen Star Wars. I won't spoil anything. So at the end of Empire, obviously you find out, Darth Vader's Luke's father. Right. You have all this like downturn, and then you go back and watch 2 and 3, which is the rise of Anakin, or sort of the fall of Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, and then you watch 6, which is Return of the Jedi, which is all about the redemption of Vader and the rise of Luke Skywalker. So it's from a story arc perspective, it's a much smarter way to watch it.
Yeah, I had not thought of that at all. Interesting.
Yeah, I never thought about it either, but there was this guy, I don't know his name, I apologize, but the Machete, it was something called the Machete blog, and he came up with this looking at it from a story arc perspective. And so it's called the Machete Order. I guess now would be really easy to tack on. You should watch Rogue One, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, and then all the other movies.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they keep continuing to release more and more movies. I mean, The Mandalorian was fantastic.
I mean, as long as they release good movies, I'm okay with that. But there's some awesome, there's some really great sci-fi stuff that doesn't reach that epic cultural level of impact, like The Expanse. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but a really amazing TV show.
Yes.
It's amazing. The Expanse, all the Disney Star Wars stuff, obviously. A lot of the Star Wars shows, or Star Trek rather, all the Star Trek shows going forward have been pretty great, and Strange New Worlds. So we'll see. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Uh,
Todd, this is.
maybe if I,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, maybe if we keep brewing sci-fi inspired nerdy sake, some of those people will come in here.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a market for that, for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna tap room's always open.
A lot
So
of diehards. Yeah, it's a great niche.
yeah. Thanks. Yeah, we do. We also have a small 1988 Panasonic TV that sits on top of the bar, and we play nothing but sci-fi stuff on it.
Nice.
Yeah, no sound, just
Yeah, just have them on.
sci-fi stuff.
Nice.
And then a lot of Friday nights here we have sci-fi movie night.
Oh,
So
fun.
we'll play some kind of classic sci-fi movie at 8 o'clock. Shut down all the lights. Yeah, it's
Oh,
fun.
that's fun. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, this has been so much fun. I feel like we got through a lot of content and sake education within a very, very short period of time. We covered a lot, and congratulations on your career and all your
Thanks.
success. And
Thanks.
you only go up from here, right? And it's the great time to be where you're at, because I'm all in on sake, and I feel like it's a category that's going to grow. Obviously, it's a small base, but I feel like it's going to grow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think it's going in the right direction for sure.
yeah,
And every account that we get is like a small victory, and is a sort of really great step in that direction. I mean, we have draft sake, obviously in Japanese inspired, sushi inspired restaurants, but we also have draft sake in a Jewish deli and a New England, seafood place and things like that.
perfect.
So the more
Yeah.
we can kind of grow that, the better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do we get in touch with you? You have a website you want to mention?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, Farthest Star Sake.
Yep.
Dot
Right there
com
on
is
his
probably
shirt
the best
for
place
the
to
YouTube
go. Right here on
viewers.
my shirt. That's right. FarthestStarSake.com is great. Obviously, at Farthest Star Sake on Instagram. We're also on Facebook, Twitter. That's easy to find. I always recommend people. So I don't know if you've ever used link in bio, but on Instagram, go to at Farthest Star Sake. There's an amazing link in our bio section that just goes to like a mini website. So that's got everything about what sake is on draft in the tap room, what events we're having in the tap room, recent PR. We were just on TV a couple
Nice.
times here in the Boston area. Yeah. So this is the 5th podcast I've done since June.
Oh, wow.
So
That's great.
that'll be up there as well. Yeah, thanks. So the link in bio and Instagram is usually where I try to push everybody for just the sheer economy of it all.
Yeah, you can't. It's hard to manage it all as a small business.
It's very. Yeah, luckily my wife Amy has a regular sort of day job, but she has kind of taken some of the website, social media stuff away from me, just because I'm brewing sake, I'm running the tap room, I'm selling out in the market and stuff, and so I just you got to give up something at some point.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, again,
she's great.
Oh, sorry.
I said she's great at it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Our Instagram is better. All of our website stuff is better because she's doing it. So,
she's got an eye for design and patient enough to learn it
all. Yeah, she does. Yeah, it's not her career, but she certainly has an eye for design.
That's really cool.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that your wife is so supportive and you have this venture together. It's really, really cool and unique situation. So, all the best, and anything I can do to help, just reach out. And I'm sure with me leaning in on the sake industry, we'll be in touch coming here the next quarter quite a bit. So I'm really looking forward to that to be announced next year. But it's pretty exciting stuff.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Yeah. But anyway,
cool.
Happy holidays to you and your family, and cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, YouTube.
Bye, YouTube. Next Thursday, I'm speaking with Mary Collineau and Bryce Wyattrack at Vanilla Wine. This dynamic duo is creating one of the coolest businesses in the industry. I'm hooked. Mary Financier turned wine lover and Bryce, a wine writer, met in grad school and decided to take the entrepreneurial road with their love of wines from all corners of the world. They meet the most interesting people at these wineries through existing contacts or actually travel there themselves, which is absolutely amazing. They find exceptional value wines that we do not normally have access to and for all great prices. The most expensive wine is $35. We tasted 3 wines on the podcast that knocked it out of the park, both in the flavor profile, but also the stories behind them, which makes each one of them special. Please visit Vinalia Wine, VINALIAWINE.com, and check out these amazing deals that you cannot get anywhere else in our industry. If you are looking for a wine club to blow your mind, look no further. Mary and Bryce have done it like no other. Tune in next Thursday and have a great week. This week's episode was produced by Fedora J Productions.